Hey guys, I am so excited about this class. We're going to do a really fun watercolor activity today. I love to start the lesson by talking about one of my books and about how I use some of these design principles in my books. So this is a book called Sleep Baby Sleep. It's a book that I did not write, but I illustrated it. And there are a few spreads or compositions I would love to share with you. So this is one composition that is made up of lots of different elements. So we have like the foreground here, the little houses are in the background. Blue is a calm color, it's a cool color. And of course, orange is a little bit more of a warm color. So now I'm going to go to a different spread that has a slightly different feel to it. So you see some warm colors like some yellow and some orange, and then in the corner you see a calm color, a cool color, blue. Let me flip to another page over here, and we're going to be talking about this one. And this particular page has a lot of cool colors, right? A lot of calming blues and grays and greens. White space in a composition like that we call negative space. So not just the ducks are white, but we also see this white in between sky, which is the negative space. Okay, and then I have one last one, and it's my favorite spread from this book actually, because it has this really happy sunset. What we will need today is a few things. First of all, in terms of paper, I would love for you guys to come up with a piece of watercolor paper. And watercolor paper is great because it's a little bit thicker than regular paper. And also it is really great at absorbing water, because when we use watercolor, we end up using a ton of water. So it's really good to have like a watercolor paper because it absorbs water. Like Bristol board doesn't do such a great job at absorbing water, but watercolor paper does. Now, since we'll be painting all the way to the edges, it's a good idea to grab either like an old newspaper or some other sheets for underneath so you don't mess up your table or your countertop. Then the second thing we need is another plate. Just like we used, like a small plate would be great, like a little kitty plate. It has to be a bit smaller than the page. So make sure that the plate or bowl, you can even grab a bowl, that you grab is smaller than the paper. We will need a brush. If you have a big brush like this, then that's great. If you don't have a big brush, then that's cool, because small brushes work too. It just means that you need a little bit more brush strokes. Great thing about like big brushes is that you only need a few brush strokes, but little brushes work just as well. We need a pencil with an eraser. We will need a big bowl with water. As you know, with watercolor, like lots of water is great. So a bigger bowl works a little bit better than a smaller bowl, because the more water we have, the better it is for the painting. And then we use some tissues and of course the watercolor themselves. Now, if you have a set of pans, then that is fantastic. That also means you probably have a bunch of colors. If you just use the tubes, the watercolor tubes like I use, then we will need 3 colors. We will need yellow, we will need red, and we will need blue, which of course are the primary colors. And then a little bit later on, we will mix 2 new colors. We will also need a little bit of orange, which of course is yellow and red mixed together. And we will need purple, which is red and blue mixed together. We're gonna get started. So I am going to start here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take all the materials off my paper so we can actually start working on it. And the way I would love to work with this paper is to use it vertically. So you can use watercolor paper this way, which is horizontally, or you can use it this way, which is vertically. So for this particular project, we're going to do it vertically. And I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of what it's going to look like when it's finished. So this is what it will look like when it's finished. So we're going to draw this big circle in the middle of the painting, and that will be the sun. And the top half of the painting will be sky. So we will have this beautiful like red and orange and yellow sky, so filled with warm colors. And then the bottom half of the painting is water. And the water will actually show the reflection of the top of the page. But because it's water, we are only going to be using cool colors. So we'll use like blues and purples, and we won't use any cool colors here. We won't use any warm colors here. We're really going to try to keep them separated. So that's what it's going to look like, to give you a sneak preview. And how we start is we grab our pencil and we basically just separate our page into two halves. So we just draw the horizon line, we just drag our pencil across the page, and we add a pencil line to our page. So it's kind of roughly split in half. So we have top half and we have bottom half. And then what we do is you grab your little plate or your bowl or whatever you've chosen, and you position it somewhat in the middle. So right over your line. And that will be your sun. So then we grab our pencil and we basically draw a pencil line all around the plate. So ta-da! Now we have a perfect circle. And for those of you who couldn't quite find it, a plate or a bowl, you can just do it by hand. You can just like make a beautiful circle out of your hand. And I think that will work just fine. So the next step is we are actually going to make our page completely wet, because the great thing about watercolor is it like bleeds into each other and it has this cool drippy effect, but that only happens if the page is wet. Then just follow along, just grab your brush and make it nice and wet, and just cover your page with water, but do not cover the circle. We want the circle to stay dry, because the object here is going to be that we're going to be adding lots of color around the circle, but we're going to leave the circle itself white. And by not adding any water to the circle, we make sure that the water doesn't accidentally bleed into the circle. So I'm just going to take my brush here, and with my brush, I keep dipping it in water, and I'm just going to add lots of water to the page. And if your brush is smaller, then you'll need to do it more times. My brush is pretty big, so I only need to do it a handful of times. But if you have a smaller brush, you just dip a little bit more times, and then you keep going until the entire surface is wet. And one trick to know if it's wet is you kind of look at it sideways, and if it's shiny, that means it's wet. So if the entire surface except for the circle is wet, then we're good to go to the next step. Well, first I'm going to focus on the top of the page, so I'm not going to do anything with the bottom of the page. Just going to zoom into the top of the page, and I'm going to show you how I am going to make the sky. So before I get started, actually, I have to mix my color still, right? Because some of you probably already have orange and purple, but I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and mix those now. So I'm going to dip my brush into the water and just mix together the yellow and the red, so it becomes this really cool orangey color. Yeah, there we go. And then once I've done that, I'm going to clean my brush in the water, because we want clean brushes when we move on to another color. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the blue and the red, so it turns into this really cool plum colored purple. There we go. Yay. So now we've got all our colors mixed, and we can actually start applying the color to our painting. And as I said, we're going to start with the top. So the closer we are to the sun, the lighter we want the color to be. And one trick with watercolor is the more water you add, the lighter it is. So just grab a little bit of the yellow paint, and just like a rainbow, I'm going to add it to the top here. So I'm going to form like this little kind of rainbow type shape right over the top of my circle. And if you're using marker or pencil, you just grab a yellow pencil or yellow marker and you just color in one band, almost as if it was a rainbow. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to not wait very long, because I don't want this paint to dry, but I clean my brush. I'm going to use the orange color, and I add an orange band right next to the yellow one, just like this. And what you will see is that the orange and the yellow will begin to bleed together, and that is a super cool effect. Then before the orange dries, I want to actually add red. So I'm going to grab my red, make sure my brush is saturated, and then I add a red band to my painting. So it still kind of looks like a rainbow, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fill my entire page up, because ultimately I want the entire top of my page to be filled with paint. So now my entire top is filled with paint. And as you remember, that the top of the finished painting is a little bit darker, right? If we're close to the sun, the paint is light. And if we're close to the corners and the top, the paint is darker. So I'm actually going to grab a little bit of extra paint, and I'm not going to dilute it with water, and just add it to the corners over here. Just like this. Because if we don't dilute our paint, then it's a little bit darker than when we do dilute it. So I'm just going to add like a little bit of pure red paint to the corners. So now we have a really nice gradation from light to dark. So let's go to the bottom of the screen and do the rest of the painting. Let me make sure that this is straightened out. All right. So the wet part here has dried up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reapply some water to the bottom, because I think that's what's happening. When the paper's not wet enough, that's when the colors don't bleed together so well. So if we make sure that the paper is wet, but remember to avoid the circle while you're making it wet, that's what will really encourage the colors to kind of bleed into each other. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start with my purple, and I'm going to apply the purple. And since I want the purple closest to the sun to be a little bit lighter, I'm really going to do my best and spread this paint out. So the more I spread it out, the lighter the color will get. However, the next band of the upside down rainbow is also going to be purple, but I apply it a little bit thicker. And what you will see is if I apply it thicker and I don't spread it out as much, is that it will automatically be a little bit darker. So the second band of purple is darker. Now, I'm only working with two colors here for the cool side. I only have blue and I have purple, but you might have a watercolor set with lots of more. Maybe you have different types of blues or different kinds of purples or lilacs, and feel free to include another color if you like. And if you're working with markers or pencils, feel free to use like different colors for that too. Try to stick with cool colors for the bottom if you want this to like resemble water, but please feel free to add in colors. Now I'm going to add in my blue and add a whole band of blue. And you'll see that the blue will, bleed together with the plummy purple, and it will make this whole cool new color in a way. Somewhere between blue and purple. There we go. And remember that it's kind of got to be like an upside down rainbow. So try to have like these circular motions with your brush. So it really kind of resembles an upside down rainbow. And then I'm doing what I did on the other side, which is I want my corners to be the darkest part of this painting. So I really add a lot of paint to my paintbrush. I dip it in the paintbrush and I don't add too much water, because the less water I add, the darker the color is. And then I really add a lot of blue here to make it really nice and dark. Yeah, there we go. And it will still bleed together a little bit because the page is still wet, but it just won't bleed as much and it will be a little bit darker. So there we go. That looks good. Now, once it's finished, it needs to dry. Like all watercolors, you want this painting to dry, and you don't really want to do anything to it until it's completely dry. You definitely don't want to start adding, black marker or black ink to it while it's dry, because what will happen is it will begin to bleed into all the colors. Set it aside for maybe an hour or an hour and a half until it's completely dry. If you are a little bit impatient, which I am sometimes, you can go ahead and ask your parent if you can borrow a blow dryer, and you can actually use a blow dryer to help it along for a little bit. If you're outside and the weather is warm, you can also just leave it in the sun for a little bit, and that will allow it to dry a little bit faster. Once your painting is dry, I want you to add the horizon line, which is this line right here. And then you can like start adding a landscape. So you can add, I'm just like adding like a cool curvy landscape over here. And of course, I want to have a similar curvy landscape in the reflection. And then you can use either a marker or a black paint or black ink to completely fill this in, kind of just like I did over here. And then you can add what you like. Like I've added trees over here, but maybe instead of trees, you want to add a city, right? So if I want to add a city, here I can make a high rise. And if I make a high rise at the top, I also want to make a high rise on the bottom. And a high rise often has, lots of windows that, at night when the sun goes down, all the lights turn on. So here, this particular high rise has a lot of windows that are on. And I want to do the same thing with its reflection. So the reflection of the high rise also has a lot of windows where the light is on. So I do the same thing. There we go. And maybe right next to the high rise, there are some houses with like, maybe they have like pointy roofs like this. There we go. So if you want to draw a Golden Gate Bridge, you can absolutely do that. You can do this. And then we just do the same thing here, right? A little fraction of the Golden Gate Bridge, and then we can do some more buildings here if we like. It's completely up to you, whatever you want to do.
Now, if you like that video, make sure you hit the like button to help us grow the YouTube channel, and hit the subscribe button to make sure that you get notified for future videos. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.